Isn't it strange that one entire generation was raised to believe they were exceptional, encouraged to dream big, achieve more, and expect opportunity, only to work relentlessly and still struggle to afford what their parents considered ordinary? It feels less like a natural social shift and more like a large-scale psychological experiment no one agreed to participate in. We're talking about millennials, those born between 1981 and 1996. And before dismissing the conversation as another tired generational debate, it's worth sitting with the deeper psychological layers here, because they're more complex than most headlines suggest. According to findings from the Pew Research Center in 2020, millennials became the first generation in modern American history projected to be financially worse off than their parents. That single statistic carries enormous psychological weight. It means millions of people are navigating adulthood with a confusing blend of accomplishment and perceived failure coexisting in their minds. Imagine growing up hearing that you could become anything, that your potential was limitless, only to graduate into the worst economic downturn in decades. The Great Recession reshaped the job market just as many millennials were stepping into it. Suddenly, the gold star wasn't a trophy for participation. It was a master's degree accompanied by crushing debt. The promise and the reality didn't align. Psychologists call that clash cognitive dissonance, the discomfort that arises when deeply held beliefs conflict with lived experience. Millennials were told that effort guarantees reward. Then they followed the instructions, studied hard, earned degrees, chased credentials, only to discover the rules had changed. Researcher Jean Twenge examined this phenomenon in her book, Generation Me. Her findings stirred controversy. Millennials scored higher on measures of narcissism compared to previous generations. But here's the twist. Those same studies also show elevated levels of anxiety and depression. That combination sounds contradictory at first. Inflated self-focus paired with fragile self-worth. But psychologically, it makes sense. When people are raised to see themselves as uniquely capable, yet repeatedly encounter systemic barriers, the internal narrative becomes unstable. Confidence and insecurity can exist side by side. Consider the cultural backdrop. Millennials were shaped by the self-esteem movement of the 1980s and 1990s. Parenting styles shifted toward affirmation and protection. Helicopter parenting, participation trophies, constant encouragement. These weren't malicious strategies. They were rooted in psychological research of the time that emphasized validation and confidence building. The intention was to nurture resilient, self-assured adults. Then reality hit hard. As millennials entered their 20s, the economy faltered. Stable career paths fragmented. The traditional formula, graduate, get hired, climb the ladder, no longer functioned as predictably. The psychological whiplash of preparing for one system and entering another cannot be overstated. Layer onto that the rise of social media. Millennials weren't small children when platforms emerged. They were adolescents and young adults still forming their identities. Facebook launched in 2004. Instagram followed in 2010. This meant millennials learned how to build careers, relationships, and adult identities while simultaneously learning how to curate and broadcast those identities online. Research by Tim Kaiser on materialism and well-being suggests that when individuals tie their self-worth to external validation, approval, image, status, their mental health tends to suffer. Social media intensifies that dynamic. It turns identity into a performance. Every post, achievement, or milestone becomes part of an ongoing public narrative. It's like campaigning for your own life with no clear endpoint. The feedback never fully stops. Meanwhile, traditional markers of adulthood, marriage, homeownership, parenthood, have been delayed or abandoned by many millennials. Surveys consistently show that they still value these milestones. The challenge isn't desire, it's feasibility. Housing costs have soared far beyond wage growth. Student debt burdens have reached historic highs. Economic mobility feels narrower. When culturally defined milestones remain out of reach, the brain doesn't simply shrug and adapt effortlessly. Chronic uncertainty produces what psychologists refer to as allostatic load, the cumulative stress of being in a prolonged state of vigilance. It's like waiting for your life to start while stuck in an indefinite holding pattern. Millennials were also raised on a narrative of meritocracy. Work hard, follow the rules, and you'll be rewarded. For decades, that framework seemed reliable. But by the time this generation arrived, tuition had multiplied dramatically. Entry-level jobs demanded experience that few could realistically possess, and the gig economy replaced stable benefits with contract work. This gap between expectation and outcome is sometimes described as schema disruption, a fracture in the mental blueprint of how the world operates. When that disruption happens collectively, it reshapes how an entire generation relates to institutions. It helps explain why millennials are often portrayed as both hopeful and skeptical. They still believe fairness should exist, but they've become doubtful that systems will deliver it. Take workplace loyalty as an example. Millennials are frequently criticized for job hopping. Yet the employment landscape shifted long before they did. Pensions disappeared. Long-term job security eroded. Layoffs became normalized corporate strategy. Adapting to that environment by seeking better opportunities isn't disloyalty, it's rational self-preservation. At the same time, millennials are among the most educated and diverse generations in history. They matured alongside the expansion of the internet, which exposed them to multiple perspectives and competing narratives. That exposure fosters critical thinking, but can also breed mistrust. When you grow up seeing how information can be shaped depending on who presents it, questioning authority becomes second nature. This tendency to interrogate established systems is sometimes labeled entitlement, but it can also reflect awareness. When long-standing structures fail to deliver on promised outcomes, scrutiny isn't rebellion, it's evaluation. Mental health awareness is another defining trait. Millennials have played a major role in normalizing therapy and open conversations about anxiety and depression. Seeking support is less stigmatized than in previous generations. That's a cultural shift with profound implications. However, they're advocating for mental health while living in objectively stressful conditions. Rising debt, escalating housing prices, unstable employment, and a rapidly shifting global landscape. The result is a paradox, heightened self-awareness paired with heightened overwhelm. And then there's the broader horizon. Millennials are confronting climate change, political polarization, technological disruption, and global instability simultaneously. Climate anxiety has emerged as a recognized psychological phenomenon. Watching environmental decline unfold while feeling limited in institutional power generates a specific kind of existential tension. So what does this all create? A generation shaped by towering expectations, economic volatility, public performance pressure, delayed milestones, and continuous crisis exposure. From the outside, the symptoms, anxiety, skepticism, burnout, might look puzzling. But from a psychological standpoint, they're predictable responses to sustained instability. Humans rely on internal maps to navigate the world. When the terrain shifts dramatically but the map remains outdated, confusion and stress follow. Millennials were handed one blueprint and encountered another reality. Their reactions aren't evidence of weakness. They're adaptations to a transformed landscape. Understanding this doesn't require glorifying or vilifying an entire age group. It simply requires recognizing context. Behavior makes sense when you examine the environment that shaped it. If parts of this resonate with your experience, consider subscribing. And if you'd like to support more in-depth psychological explorations like this, becoming a channel member genuinely helps.